There's definitely a time and a space for thinking positive. Like studies show people with a slightly more optimistic outlook on life stand a far greater chance of developing post-traumatic growth from post-traumatic stress syndrome. But that does not mean you can't think positive your way out of poverty. You can't vision board your way out of a queue for a food bank. It's not how it works. So rather than kind of adopting that it is what it is mentality, I'm gonna think positive, it is what it is. Instead we change it to it is what I choose to make it.
Hi, I'm the self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, and welcome to the Self-Development Podcast. In this episode, I'm chatting with the author, psychotherapist, and military mental resilience coach, James Elliott. James has over 6 years of coaching experience, from National League Rugby teams to Paralympic rowers, from special forces operators to vulnerable veterans. He has a wealth of knowledge in designing, developing, and delivering mental resilience training programs, both group training and one-to-one therapy. James is the author of the book, Think Yourself Resilient. His book will teach you how to harness your emotions so that you can build confidence and transform your life. And I'm excited to be discussing his book and his methods with him today. How are you today, James?
Hello, mate. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, mate. Nailed the intro, love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's an ongoing joke I have with the listeners that I savagely butcher it, and they can always tell where the little edit is where I've cut it in. So I did all right this time. I reckon we can keep that one, Charlie. Mate, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Yeah, I'm really, really good. You know, it's that Friday feeling, you know, do my podcast this Friday night, and then I'm having my daughter tonight. I get to see my daughter every day. I'm really lucky in that sense. I live around the corner from my mum, so I do the school run stuff, which is great, and I see her every day, and she can stay at mine whenever. So I've got her tonight, and I'm feeling a fish and chip Friday.
I think that sounds like mate. You've just literally planted that in my head.
Yeah.
I know exactly what I'm going to do when I get off this call.
Yeah, feeling that. But unfortunately, I don't wear the trousers in that relationship. She's 11 years old, so she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
I'm feeling fish and chip Friday, but if she's not, then we'll compromise and we'll not have it.
Yeah, that's basically the compromise. Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. That is the truth. Yeah, I'm taking my 10-year-old to Twickenham this weekend to watch the rugby. So I live in Cornwall, so it's quite a trek, but we're really excited.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, mate, is this his first time at Twickenham as well?
It's my first time at Twickenham. Believe it or not.
Mate.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, honestly, your first time there, it is such a beautiful ground. It really is, and the atmosphere is so different at Twickenham than anywhere. I don't know if you've done the football stuff before, but it's such a different atmosphere. The food vendors, the music. It's like a mini festival going on outside. There's so much more to it than just the rugby that's going on inside. And there's always really good coffee and good street eats.
Love
burgers
it.
And fajitas everywhere. It's so good. It's such a day. He will be one tired boy on the way home, but it's so good. So will you.
Well, we're gonna stop there overnight because I gathered that. I mean, it's quite the drive. We're gonna set off tomorrow, obviously from Cornwall, so it's good 4 hours.
Yeah.
If we get a straight run, so yeah, we're really excited about it. And he's not home yet. Otherwise, he'd probably run in here while we're recording, knowing him, to be honest. but yeah, I mean, so you are an author. How does that feel?
Crazy. It feels crazy to say that. So, really, the whole idea of the book started about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's when ideas first started getting sort of drawn together and started piecing things together. And then I got approached by Thread, which is obviously the publishers who have published the book. And I kind of said, this is what I've got. And they're like, cool, start again.
Savage.
Completely understand him. Not in any way throwing shade, but what I had was a mess.
Right.
That is a guy who doesn't really know what he's doing, doesn't know how to write a book. How do you write a book? People say, just start writing a book. Oh, okay, thanks. They love the model of mental resilience that I use. They love that. That's great. It's a reasonably common thing, but obviously with how to build models like that to have pillars. Yeah. You talk about pillars of health, right? Well, let's take that and let's make this so it's about resilience, emotional resilience. And we love this. We love what we got as pillars. We're going to keep that. We're going to keep some of the structure, but let's because it's messy. It didn't flow. It was all over the shop. it was clearly someone who just had lots of thoughts.
Yeah.
Who just basically vomited these thoughts onto a page and said, I've written a book. Like, no, there's no structure, there's no like development, there's no, and so that's, when it starts. So yeah, now like there's this book and people are getting the book and people are reading the book and people are going, I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah.
Like, and it's horrible for such a long period of time, because I'm not this is the only way I can think of drawing an analogy to it, but I'm not in any way saying that I am an artist. But it's like an artist gets picked up by a gallery and they say, we want you to do an exhibition. And they do this exhibition and then they put the tickets for the exhibition out for like sale and loads of people book it.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh my God. Like the worry was that nobody was going to book it.
Yeah.
But now loads of people have booked tickets. And then all these people are now queuing up outside. And you're like,
I can feel that. I can actually feel that.
Yeah. And you're like peeking around this curtain, like, like there's so many people there. And then like 1 or 2 people have come in, 3 or 4 or 5 have come in and they've gone, people who you really like the real critics who stand at the front have come in and had a little look around and they've gone, this is great. And it's just like, really? Several of my, friends who we sent copies of the book up to come back and said, I'm really enjoying this, mate. This is really well written. Like, I know you, I know your story. So I'm finding this really interesting. I love the science side of it. And I love how you put all this information and research and studies suggest this and studies suggest that. And you've put in there your anecdotes to back it up, which is really interesting. And I'm like, thank God. So yeah, I'm an author. It's really strange to say. It's quite an enjoyable, strange, slightly overwhelming at times. Yeah, process. Yeah, it is. It's not just because your calendar's full, but because there's this pressure of like selling something that's such a representation of you, and you don't know how it's going to be taken, what people are going to say, what people are going to think. And like in a perfect world, the whole point of psychology is that only rely on internal responses to the world to manage yourself. But like the reality is, of course, we all care what people think. When you've produced something, you want people to like it, you want it to be helpful. And I've tried to adopt the sort of mindset that as long as it lands into the hands of one person who needs it and it helps them, then I've done whatever it is I've set out to do. But at the same time, it's still really scary at times. You still wake up in the middle of the night going, what if I get slated? What if it's terrible? What if it crashes and burns? And
it's because it's important to you, isn't it? I mean, I've been following you for a while on social media, not in real life, mate. Don't worry. I've been following you on social media for a while, and if I'm honest, mate, like your education is obvious. Your experiences are experiences that not everybody's going to get to experience. So it offers a very unique perspective, and you've been in some high stress moments in your life.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It gets to a point where I stop short of saying it's an obligation for you to write a book, because you have really got some stuff to say and it is important. And I think you're right. I think the people that do read it, the ones that really are in that place where they feel pretty helpless, they feel like they've tried everything. They've gone to social media and they've unfortunately followed the toxic positivity people or whatever. And now they found your book. I think they're in really good hands. So I'm grateful for it, because it's going to be a reference book for me and for my clients. So I'm grateful for it as a coach.
Oh, that's really kind, mate. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's definitely trying to take a step away from that kind of toxic positivity. There's definitely a time and a space for thinking positive. Like studies show, people with a slightly more optimistic outlook on life stand a far greater chance of developing post-traumatic growth from post-traumatic stress syndrome. But that does not mean you can't think positive your way out of poverty. You can't vision board your way out of a queue for a food bank. It's not how it works. So rather than kind of adopting that it is what it is mentality, I'm gonna think positive. It is what it is. Instead, we change it to it is what I choose to make it. Like how instead of think positive, let's think proactive. What can I do? How can I manage the situation? How am I dealing with this? How am I managing stress? And it's about that conversation. It's stepping away from that think positive, which is just, there's a time and a place for every element of sort of the psychotherapeutic spectrum. But actually what I'm finding is increasingly with the vulnerable veterans or the very high performing athletes is very rarely is it a case of think positive. It's quite often a case of, we're going to take some steps. We need to start moving. Like, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. Like the whole idea of manifestation for a lot of those people is quite offensive, because it's just not as simple as that. And that's so alienating for so many people in the world, where you're going to say, you just have to manifest. You have to believe that you deserve it. And these people, it's not the real world for a lot of people. So trying to create something that is usable and applicable and doesn't in any way pander. I didn't want something to be patronizing, nor did I want something to be overly full of psychobabble, which I'm not in any way suggesting that I'm so all over it because I read stuff and I'm like, I do not have a clue what they're trying to say. I have to go away and come back and think about it and reread. So I'm glad that elements of the education show through, and I'm really, really I love the pursuit of education. I love reading. I love taking it on board. I love still being at university. I love it. And it's just a journey that I just don't see ending anytime soon. I just want to keep learning and keep absorbing this information and keep finding out. I want to do like more philosophy stuff in maybe sort of 5 years' time, once I've finished sort of where I'm at. I want to move on, and because I find it so interesting. But I'm glad the education shows through, but I'm also glad that it's relatable and it's human, and people can read that and see that and go, I see what he's trying to say. I'm taking that on board.
Yeah, I mean, the way I describe it is it's absent of ego. You're not trying to convince people that you're the smartest person in the room. You're just trying to help. And what you offer very, very obviously in that book is hope.
Yeah, right.
Because when people feel crap, it's really hard to believe that you're not going to feel like that forever. And I think that what you offer people in there is hope, man. Is that you can get past this very difficult situation that you're in.
That's a really beautiful observation. That's not something that I personally considered. So I'm really I'm flattered that comes through. But there are times where you just can't see. Like, people talk about, oh, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. What I hope the book helps people with is to become the light in the tunnel.
Yeah, I love that. Give me goosebumps. That's brilliant. Yeah.
And
that, like I say, it definitely comes through. I mean, we've hit the ground running by the seams of it, but I'll go back to the beginning and just say, for those that aren't familiar with your work yet, I mean, can you tell people a bit about yourself and your journey so far?
Cool. Yeah. So I'm a psychotherapist and resilience coach. So I joined the British Army in 2006, and as covered in the book, it wasn't necessarily a particularly stable, safe childhood. Like, my biological father went to prison when I was 13. He was a drug dealer, like really incredibly abusive, and it's really sort of complicated and nuanced, that kind of period of time from sort of when I was sort of living with in that environment. It was really destructive, and that has a massive effect, right, on people's mental health and their mentality. I was diagnosed with childhood depression when I was 12. I'm very open about this. Like, I even put the screenshot of my medical records on my social media to say, listen, this is my past. Like, I've been in really awful places. And to be that age and to be in a really difficult place shapes you. So I kind of left school, like, crashed out, typically building sites, that type of thing, not having a great time, not really knowing, leaving home at 16, not knowing what's going on, where I am, having had more than one night, under in and out of, like, sleeping rough and in really dangerous environments and really dangerous circumstances, decided I was going to join the army. So join the army, and absolutely fell in love with it. I think the army is a fantastic organization. I think it takes very lost, disillusioned, angry young men and women and gives them a platform to better themselves. There is education in the army. There is friendship. There is discipline. There are so many wonderful things. There are adventures and things that I've got to go and do that I would simply never have done. Like, if we're going to call a spade, I was going to become a drug dealer like my dad. Like, there's no two ways about it. He was a gangster, a football hooligan, a proper scumbag. Like, that was where I was going. That was who I was becoming. And I joined the army and I absolutely fell in love with it. And okay, there's an element of the army recruits soldiers from a very low socioeconomic demographic because they're more resilient, because they've had a tough upbringing, or because they're more vulnerable and therefore easier to radicalize. Like, you know, there's an element of that. You know, we're going to feed you, we're going to look after you, we're going to clothe you, we're going to give you money and a roof over your head, but you do as you're told. Like, yes. But I loved the army. I joined the airborne forces and I loved it. I truly, truly adored it. And I, you know, all that time with military service, so from 2006 and I left the reserves in 2020, but I did, you know, 12 years in the regular. So that time included operational service in Afghanistan, included deployments, it included all that kind of stuff. And I don't necessarily go into too much detail about those things. That isn't that kind of book. Like, my book is not a war story. I don't have those stories to share. It's not my thing. I do use parts of the army because I think the army is an amazing just kaleidoscope of human experience and people and relationships and friendships and loves and despises that you go through in there. I think it's just so shaping. I think it's the best place in the world to see the full scope of humanity. And so I left the British Army in 2019. I signed off, but in 2015, I was really ill with my mental health whilst I was serving, and I kind of took like a second job almost, but it was working for a National League Rugby team called Colchester. So Colchester was my local town. But basically what happened was I was in a really bad way. This guy comes to my room called Lee Soper, who's 6'6" and has no front teeth, and he's built like a Coke machine with legs. And he says, I want you to come and be the strength conditioning coach at Colchester Rugby Club. You just off a special forces selection, you served operationally, you're a physical training instructor. The guys say, I love you. And you can do what Soaps wants, or you can do what Soaps wants with a black eye. Either way, you're doing what Soaps wants. And I was like, no, I don't really want to. Anyway, next thing, I'm being dragged into this car, ice pack to my eye. And he's dragged me in, and I've sat there and I've had this kind of chat with the head coach of Colchester Rugby Club. He's going, yeah, we'd absolutely love to have you on board. You'd be great. And so I started strength conditioning coaching at Colchester, and I realised that I really, really enjoyed the strength conditioning side. I actually gave me quite a lot of mentoring, and I really enjoyed that. Like, there were young lads there who would go on to play at Wasps, Exeter Chiefs, you know, like guys who go and play like an extremely high level of rugby, like Premier League rugby. And the first time they bench pressed, deadlifted, or squatted I was showing them that. But not only that, we're having these conversations. They're worried about their performance. I thought I didn't do that well on Saturday, and the head coach is, you know, doesn't like me, and all those kind of usual kind of neuroses that come from being a very young, you know, but National League standard, very high standard young lads playing very high standard of rugby. And so having those conversations with them and then relaying them to the coaching staff and sort of having these conversations, helping them and helping them, I was like, I really enjoy this. Like, the whole mental side of this is so interesting to me. So it actually really helped. And in 2016, I kind of was properly reintegrated back into work and been in, you know, a really difficult place. The work was great. And the RAF turned to the army and said, listen, we can't actually man your parachuting needs anymore. Like, Afghanistan is finished for you guys, and you're all going back to conventional warfare, which means lots of parachuting, and we can't meet that. So you're going to have to slow down. And the airborne went, well, no. What if we pick 8 guys, we send them to you, you make them parachute instructors, and we just basically become self-sufficient with our own parachuting needs, self-sufficient-ish, but self-sufficient with our own training needs. And they went, all right. And so I basically got this call and was like, are you interested in going to RAF Bison and become part of this sort of first ever, what we call like tactical parachuting instructors platoon? And I was like, well, the obvious answer to that is yes. Like, yeah. So off I went, and with 7 other lads, and we formed this platoon, and it was just amazing because not only was it the job satisfaction was amazing, and the RAF instructors and the establishment there were so welcoming and so brilliant. Like, we was playing rugby and doing loads of coaching and getting involved with all these types of things. The whole thing was just such a brilliant holistic experience there. And some of the best people I've met in the military have really been from places where initially I wouldn't have necessarily expected it. And now I've met these guys, and they're still like really close friends today. So they're a wonderful group of people. And and I realized that if I applied the same kind of mentoring and coaching skills that I did with the National League Rugby team with these young paratroopers, who the first time some of them were getting on board an aircraft, like, I was throwing them out with it. Like, that's a scary place to be. So, you know, and having been that young lad, like, trying to get out the door of all that kit and you know, being completely overwhelmed by the place that you are. Yeah, horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
I just swore.
Yeah. That kit is so heavy. Like parachuting, carrying weapons and food and ammunition and all that type of stuff, which is just represented in the parachute training school by one of those massive rubber breeze blocks you put in this bag, tie it to your legs, and you have to learn to just awful. Like,
oh my God.
like a little bit unnecessary, guys. Come on. I'm not even landing on a mattress. Like, I'm just landing on the ground. And so what I did was I kind of took those coaching skills and then applied them to the lads. So I talk about emotional regulation and staying focused on task and how to calm that anxiety response. And then I uncharacteristically for myself was actually reading my emails. And I had this sort of monthly email that gets sent out by Army headquarters and talk about how they're looking at changing the mental health process. And I said, you know what, we do it wrong. We do it wrong in the Army. And I said, we should be looking at this proactively. Like, we should be talking about these key psychological skills before somebody goes ill. Why does somebody have to be sick, go, actually, I am really ill, I'm in a really bad place, before we're willing to do something? Why are we not talking about resilience? This is what I've been doing when I was coaching at a rugby club. This is what I'm doing at the parachute training school. There's a real thing here. And Army headquarters, fair play to them, got back to me almost straight away and said, let's have a conversation. Yeah. And he took me out of there and put me into the mental resilience training team, made me second in command of British Army mental resilience training. And like, all of a sudden it was like, well, welcome to the fire. You need to start studying. And so I started studying, and I was doing like sports psychology stuff, effective coaching and mentoring, which kind of, my degree equivalent came from that. And just did loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of studying. And whilst sort of helping with the development of this resilience program that kind of already existed, but just wasn't in any way being sort of broadcast. We sat down, kind of modernized, brought up to speed mental resilience training, and off I went. And my job was to teach mental resilience to like every regiment based on what was kind of identified as the south of the country. So it was literally Monday to Friday, go and deliver resilience, go and deliver this, go and deliver resilience. And then you'd finish delivering resilience, go back to my room and have to study and read and learn more and study and read. And that was it for like day in, day out for like 2 years. And then kind of eventually just went, this has been fantastic. I just feel that I'm in that space where I'm ready to leave the military. So I stepped outside. And I did some work with Paralympians, and Scottish Police brought me on board to run their resilience and performance coaching. So I did Police Scotland, did a little bit with Thames Valley, done some stuff with NHS, fire service. Lots of individuals came to me, and I was constantly pursuing this education, got qualified as a psychotherapist, started delivering them one-on-one training in resilience. And I found loads of like golden threads that would go through, the different clients and different people and different environments in which I was working. It's just this really beautiful thing that Muhammad Ali said, which is, it's not the mountain which tires you out, but the stone in your shoe. And I find that to just be so true. Like, people are so capable of so many amazing things, but there's this piece of self-doubt because something awful happened to them in childhood, or their emotional needs weren't met, or someone told them that they couldn't, or they had an injury, and so they carry this stone in their shoe, which just slows them down. And so like, I found the whole purpose was getting them to take that stone out of the shoe. They have to learn to take the stone out of their shoe, to talk about it, to air it, to discuss it, and to realize that they could discard that stone was slowing them down, and that actually the mountain becomes so much more achievable without that stone. And it just went from like strength to strength, and I worked with people who would then come to me and say, I want to be an IFBB pro, which is I want to be a bodybuilding pro. I was like, okay, cool. And then 18 months later, they're holding up their IFBB pro card and they're saying, thank you so much to this guy for what he's done. And then Olympia pros like started, approaching me. People who do the Olympia, who in Vegas, who get up on the stage there, they started approaching me. And then more and more and more like senior members of like the fitness industry, because inevitably that's what got pulled. I've got my world records. I played rugby. Like I take a huge amount of care over my fitness and health. I'm that guy carrying tubs of chicken and rice around with him and eating well. And, I'm that boring. Drinking my water, got a big obnoxious water bottle, like one of them bad boys. And so it just kind of went from, it just grew so organically. And then, I got asked to write this book. and I write this book, and more and more people are really listening and sitting up and going, well, what's he actually got to say? And it's been such an amazing thing to just kind of. One of the key things that I make in the book is that I'm a representation of my friends, really. I'm just the figurehead of all of these people who have believed in me, enabled me, facilitated my success, from guys at the brigade who believed in me, in the army who believed in me, from guys at Colchester Rugby Club who believed in me and still do. I'm still a part of that community. I live in Colchester now. I still go and support. I love them very much. To the guys at the RAF who really kind of invested and really believed me, to those at Army headquarters, to those the friendships that I've made and the people in my life and the athletes who constantly push me and say, keep going, you're doing great. I think I was about 2/3 of the way through the book, and I said to a friend of mine, I said, I'm really thinking about just giving up. I just don't know that I can do this. It's just too much. I'm going to need to take a break. And as he pointed out, he said, it's bigger than you are. This has now become bigger than you are. Not only have we invested so much in you, like you have not come this far to only come this far, but secondly, like you are a representation. Like you're one of the lads. You're one of the blokes. Like and he means this in the most loving way. You're one of the scumbags, and so you're one of the men. And you're at this point where you're studying a master's degree in war and psychiatry at King's College in London, and you've written a book on mental resilience. Or you're writing a book on mental resilience. Like you don't get to stop there now because people are watching you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, that's what it comes down to. So that's kind of that's me. I'm in this place because there are times when people have really believed in me, and people have really pushed me, and people have actually really stuck their neck out and said, "Let's give him a shot." And so here I am, doing psychotherapy, doing podcasts, doing lots of group talks, going into these big establishments and organizations and having these conversations. Like doing Police Scotland was massive. That was like 23,000 officers, had like a year, just worked like solidly.
That's a lot.
It was amazing, and so really getting to express myself and talk about all these different and amazing things that I'm getting to do, getting involved in Fit Expo, which is like this massive fitness expo that goes on in the country. It's now going to be the biggest, and it's like by far the best. Getting involved there, doing loads about athlete mental health and bodybuilding and the fitness industry in general. It's just been amazing, mate. It's just been this amazing journey, and I know that it seems so cliche. It's like everyone talks about a journey, but it has just been amazing, and I'm so blessed with the people in my life that have helped facilitate. Even my editors, who the publishers who really believed in me. I dare say there's times where the people who helped me edit and publish this book have probably gone, he's hard work. He's disorganized, to say the least. I'm creative, but I'm chaotic.
I think most creatives are, aren't they? I think most creative people are chaotic, and it's what makes them brilliant in a way. It's like you have all these ideas, and sometimes you need people to be the containers for them. Otherwise, it's like having a handful of marbles that just fall off the table. You just got to have. I've realised the irony in using the word marbles, though.
I've probably lost them. I'll be using that next time I'm late because I was watching Batman. I'm a creative, but I have to be like this. Shut up, James, you're late. But that's
I love how humble you are. How you include everyone else in your journey too, as all part of what you've done. I hold this book up for those that are watching on YouTube. This is the book, and he's done this on his own, but with everybody in his life.
I think that there's this really awful expression that we've got in the modern world, which is self-made. I'm not a fan of that word, because
I get that.
Nobody truly is. Like, we all have support, and I know it's such a social mediaism, but like some of like these huge names, from your Jeff Bezos and whatever, who are like, oh, they're self-made. Like they're not. Like when you actually like examine the story, of course they're not. Like nobody. We're all human beings. Many leaves and one tree. We're all interconnected, and and we all rely on each other for different things. And actually, like the more we embrace that collectivism and disregard individualism, like actually the much happier we'll be. We're not designed to live as we are, and we need to stop pushing this narrative that anyone is self-made. Like if you need help and support, you'd be amazed what happens when you reach out for it.
Yeah, and I think that's what you know, if we're going to take any helpful lesson from the pandemic, we learned that we needed that connection. We needed other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
The people that didn't have that had a really hard time, you
Yeah.
know. But that stone in the shoe thing analogy you used, I really resonate with that. I come from a background of domestic violence and physical abuse, and I had that voice in my head every morning for a very, very long time, and it ended up leading to addiction at some point, so I could literally drown it out. So I really resonate with that. I really, really do.
No,
uh, Mental resilience happens to be your thing. So for those that aren't quite sure what you mean when you say mental resilience, what is mental resilience?
It's such an interesting question, and it's inevitably one I get asked all the time. And I would say it's the ability to thrive when other people try and survive. It's when something really challenging happens, you're seeing opportunity. You're not seeing disaster. You know, it's that ability to reframe the situation you're in, and it's your ability to recover from stress. Like, it's not about denying that you're ever going to have stress on board. It's about accepting the stress on board and learning how to manage and recover from it. It's about having a really supportive group of friends and people around you who are really, really supportive, friends and family. But when I say friends and family, I mean, you know, you can choose family. Like, people will often at this point throw in the quote that blood is thicker than water, but actually that's not the quote at all. The quote is that blood of the chalice is thicker than water of the womb, which means who you choose to be in your life is far more important than what you were born into.
Wow.
So, you know, choosing those powerful, yeah, right. It's a real common misquote of people, but choosing, you know, having the right powerful people around you is so important to your development as a human being. And it's, you know, it's something that we miss out on massively, but it's so beautiful and so important. And so, you know, and resilience is about that confidence, you know, to build a stack of undeniable proof. You are who you say you are, you know, and to go to where you have no confidence and sit there to learn and develop that self-efficacy. And it's about being physically robust as well, having that physical health, how to look after yourself, making sure you're doing the things, because we live actually in a very unhealthy world. Although, like, you know, life expectancy has gone up, as it should. Life expectancy has gone up in the UK, and it continues to go up. You know, technically we're living far longer than we ever have before, but are we living in a healthier way than we ever have before? So looking at our health behaviors and understanding how that affects our resilience, understanding how our cognitive patterns and our ability to kind of regulate our emotional state, that plays into it. And what are we thinking about, and what are we focusing upon it? And all of those kind of combined is that mental resilience. It's all of those things. And it means slightly different things to slightly different people. One of the things that I've loved so much about working with such a huge variety of people, be it, you know, hardened members of special forces who are just the epitome of tough, and or it be really creative and sensitive and emotionally in tune dancers and musicians. The mental resilience actually looks slightly different for every person. What we're asking of someone is ultimately the ability to manage stress, the ability to manage that pressure, to harness that, to use that for success. But in the amount of different contexts, environments, and perspectives that it applies to, is just so incredible. And actually, like, it's really humbling when you see some of these forms of resilience that people have, some of these things that people have had to survive, some of these things that people have had to go through. Some of these stones in people's shoes have been unbelievable, and actually working with these people and helping them develop this resilience and understanding resilience slightly better every day has been probably the greatest privilege of my life. That and raising my daughter are the two greatest privileges of my life. So resilience is it's multi-layered, it's fascinating, and it applies to everybody in slightly different ways. But ultimately what we're talking about is that ability to manage that stress, to change the position that you're in through your perceptions, through your health behaviors, through your social support, and through your confidence.
That's what I love about your approach, that you don't just have this one answer that applies to everybody. You draw, because life is multifaceted. There's so many different things. Right. You change something over here, it has an impact over here. You change something over here, and an impact over here. And some people think that process comes to an end, but it doesn't. That's what life is.
Yeah,
Continuous cycle of change. And I think a lot of people get anxious about change and they wait for things to settle down, but actually it never does, you know. The next thing's round the corner, good or bad. And I think one of the things that gets taken away these days is the effort. We live in a world where if you want to watch, you know, back when I was young, if you wanted to watch a film, you had to talk your mum into taking you to the video shop, and you had to hope that they had the video in, and then you had to get the video and then take it back and all that. Now they just press a button on Netflix. You know, if you want something, you just order it from Amazon, or if you want music, you just get it from iTunes. And I think the effort in life is gone.
Right. Degree, yeah. I mean, you know? It's fascinating, right? So the world becomes more convenient.
Yes.
Right? The world is more convenient than it has ever been. And yet we have not seen like a massive spike in positive health. If anything, we see the opposite, which is really fascinating. And sort of why is that? Trying to tap into the psychology of that is so interesting. And I think one of the things that like we get so wrong is we shout about motivation at people. Like, and we use such negative language, you know, like we talk about things like alpha, like just ridiculous. We talk about things, you know, like we talk, you know, you got to be a lion, you got to be a Spartan, you know, you got to prepare for war, and like that language doesn't engage with anybody who's not a 19-year-old boy. Like it's so, you know,
true.
Yeah, for sure. You know, like negative reinforcement is not an effective way of getting someone to do anything. Like you can't bully people into positive health behaviors. Actually, if you want to see behavior repeated, you have to positively reward that behavior so they get a rush of dopamine from completing that task, and therefore they're far more likely to repeat it. Screaming and shouting at people about motivation, and you see so many, just as an example, so many PTs or body coaches shout about motivation. There's so many pages, Millionaire Maker, and how to, you know, you see all this social media nonsense about becoming a millionaire, becoming a billionaire. It's all about effort, it's all about work rate, it's not. Don't get me wrong, like there's a huge amount of work rate involved in it. And there are plenty of times where I've done 14-hour days, but I also love what it is that I do. That's a massive thing. I've been privileged enough to find something that I truly love what I do. And Alfred Adler, a famous psychologist who was really good friends with Freud until he had the audacity to disagree with Freud. And anyone who disagreed with Freud wound up getting excommunicated. And there was a lot that Freud was very wrong about. But Adler said, you know what, I'm not into this idea that everything is repressed sexual desire. And I think, like we talk about a fear of rejection, and Freud went mad. But one of the really interesting things that Alfred Adler talks about with the fear of rejection is he said that the key to fulfillment is finding what you are good at and using that to benefit the world around you.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
All right. And it's amazing how much more motivated I've become to achieve these things when I have found something that I truly love doing. You know, we talk all the time about goals. You've got to set goals and be motivated towards these goals. But if that goal doesn't fit in line with your sort of authentic self, the intrinsic drives that we have, things that make you happy and bring you fulfillment, if that doesn't fit within that, then every day is going to be a slog to achieve that. But if you challenge your identity to fit that purpose, you're far more likely to be successful. Like, who actually am I? What am I trying to do? Like motivation, like people say, I don't believe in motivation, I believe in discipline. I don't believe in either. I believe in fitting your identity to your purpose, like challenging who you are. Like, what is it I want? And we can see that in uses of language. People who say, I'm now an ex-smoker, compared to people who saying I'm trying to quit smoking, are far more likely, it's something incredible, like 80% more likely to never touch a cigarette again, because they use the language, I'm now an ex-smoker, I'm challenging my identity. I'm not setting a goal or trying to do these steps. I've simply challenged my identity, challenged who I am. So we talk about this world of great convenience that we live in. People have formed these identities, you know, particularly around health behaviors of some laziness. But then you say, but then it's not laziness. Maybe there's no such thing as laziness. Maybe they just haven't seen the benefit of what it is that they need to do. Maybe actually what we need to be looking at is education. People can understand why they should be doing something and challenging their identity to fit that. Then they're far more likely to continue that behavior with minimal involvement from anybody else.
Yeah.
But instead, we almost criminalize people who sit at the bottom of the socioeconomic demographic with poor health. We talk about, poverty and benefit. You look at all the language, chavs, benefit cheats, benefit frauds. It's disgusting. It's nothing more than a demonization of the working class. And then it's just people who don't understand their own privileges are so quick to look down and say, well, if you wanted it enough, you'd be here. And you're like, you went to private school.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, you're right. You know, they don't understand it. They don't have that experience. They'd never had to experience the things that those people had. There's no compassion.
Right.
No compassion. And I think you're right. It's like there's a harmony between effort and rest.
Right. Yeah.
Because people have this thing, you have to earn rest. You don't earn rest. It's a fundamental need.
Right,
if you don't rest, you will die.
Yeah.
You know, so it is about that harmony. It's sensible, being smart, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And there's like huge amounts to that. And I think that's right. You know, people talk about a work-life balance. Well, I talk about a work-life contrast. Like, oh, you've worked really hard, then rest really hard. Don't talk about doing the bare minimum rest. Like, you're a human being. Run around in the forest and eat berries. Like, that's what you're designed to do. Yeah. Like you've had a really awful 2-week period at work. It's been like the grind has really been on. And I'm not, you know, I can't stand grind culture. Like, rest, recover. Like, take that space for you, breathe, do the things that bring you joy, spend time with people who love you. Like, don't go, right, I've had a really tough week. Okay, cool, right. Well, I'll definitely get 6 hours of sleep tonight because I've got to make sure I'm up awake for 5 o'clock tomorrow. Like, what? That's not, you know.
It's one of the beautiful examples that bodybuilding offers us, is that transformation, that growth, that strength, it all comes in the rest period. You know, and it's important. The first thing that any decent trainer will show you is, hey man, you're not resting. You know, you're doing 7 days a week in the gym and you're training twice a day. It's too much. You know, you're not eating enough food. It's, you know, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. So I absolutely agree, and I love that. That was a beautiful almost rant of just loads of really true things. Frankly,
yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, go on.
What's essential to consider when building resilience?
Seeing where you are very clearly, seeing who you are very clearly.
Being honest with yourself.
Being honest, like, have that introspective conversation. A really, really, really great question you can ask yourself when you're in a really difficult place is, what advice would I give to my child? And I'm focusing on child here, but obviously for people who don't have children, you know, your best friend or any person who you might have had to mentor or support, you know, what advice would I give to my child in this exact same situation as me? Like, you want to nurture that person. You want that person to grow, to feel loved, to be embraced, to face the world with you know, with courage and authenticity and integrity and beauty. And if you want that for them, why don't you want that for you? Yeah. So that's, you know, asking yourself that question, like, what advice would I give to my daughter? There's obviously specific to me, I'd say my daughter in this exact same situation. Like, where am I? Who am I? Where do I want to go? What do I need to do? Okay, right. That's what I want to do. That's what I need to do. How is my identity? How are my behaviors a reflection of that? You know, and there's loads of examples of stuff like this. And I'm not necessarily a massive fan of stoicism because it teaches us quite a lot of emotional suppression. But Marcus Aurelius said, stop arguing what a good man could be and become one. Yeah. You know, and you know, if you prefer your philosophy or if you prefer your motivation more biblical, Isaiah chapter 6, the Lord said, who will go, whom shall I send? And I said, I'm here, Lord, send me. You know, just become that thing, become that bastion of integrity, become that thing. You want to grow and be authentic in your life and achieve these great things, and become that person. Like, challenge your identity to fit that, but be honest with who you are. Where am I? What advice would I give to my child in this position? Become what it is that I need to be. And the only way you can become what you need to be is being very honest with who you truly are.
You speak with such power, man. You really do. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I've got nothing more to add to that. Nothing more to add to that at all. It's just, yeah, you really do speak with such power and passion. Something that I think is really important, I always have. No, that's not true. I've not always thought that. It's something that I've learned recently and has been the game changer for me is emotions.
Right.
You know, and there's been a lot of talk about emotions recently, and it's like all of a sudden people are surprised that emotions are important. When they have always been important. So how does emotional intelligence factor into mental resilience?
Okay, well, I mean, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the 5 sort of key aspects of emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Loads of people walk around this entire face of the earth without any like self-awareness.
I've met
there are people.
Some of them.
Yeah. Walk around and just are completely unaware of how it is that they're feeling. They're just behaving, not thinking, oh, I feel really stressed, or I feel really tired, I feel really on edge, or just any emotion. I feel sad, grief, I don't get it. So they just project everything outwards with just very little knowledge. It's self-awareness. So that's one part of emotional intelligence, being aware of your emotional state. The second part is emotional regulation, the ability to regulate your emotional state, to understand your thought patterns, to understand what your body is trying to tell you. And that's a huge amount. So like self-awareness and emotional regulation really tie into being aware of your body's physiological state, because your body's physiological state, generally speaking, is dictated by your subconscious, which is your emotional center, your limbic system, which is basically telling you all the time about things you do like, things you don't like, things you're bothered by, things you're scared of, things that I think might threaten your position on a social hierarchy, something you might want to eat, something you might want to be physically intimate with, something that you might be tired. All of this stuff reflects, and we have loads of really fascinating turns of phrases in the English language, like they make my hair stand on end, or any one of those giving me butterflies in my stomach. What we're talking about is we're giving names, we're giving phrases to our physiological responses, which is actually happening all the time.
Makes my blood boil. That's another
makes
one.
my blood boil. That's a great one. Yeah,
yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, definitely gonna use that as a future example. Thank you. Yeah, it makes my blood boil. Yeah, and those are just examples of how your physiological state is constantly trying to communicate with you. So being aware of that and understanding how you can manage that. So that's self-awareness and emotional regulation. Kind of a third part of it is empathy. Now, this empathy is like really fascinating. So something that I always teach people is, before you react to someone else, assume that it's a bigger picture and assume you don't know what it is, because there is a bigger picture. There's always a bigger picture, and you don't know what it is. Like every single behavior that we learn has a function. Like we have learned that, we have observed that, generally speaking, from childhood. We have observed that, and we are recreating that in our adult life. So we're seeing a similar stimuli to what we saw as a child, and we're recreating the behavior that we observed as a child to manage that threat. We are going to recreate that as an adult. Even if we watched the caregiver behave in a certain way, they didn't even particularly manage the threat very well, they became very aggressive, hostile, whatever it might be, we are still going to recreate that, because the brain is seeking to create what is familiar, because familiarity is safety. So that person who might be projecting their insecurity, you might become aggressive, might have said something, might have done something, just assume, be empathetic, assume that there's a bigger picture, and assume that you don't know what it is, because there is a big picture and you don't know what it is, and their behavior in their head has a function, right? So being empathetic, but it also means being empathetic to yourself, because you fall into that bracket as well. Like your behavior is learned. Like that's a function behind that behavior, and you are projecting that onto someone else, into something else. And being empathetic and understanding to that is a far greater way of creating change.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, no, please.
No, it's in the word, isn't it? Reaction.
Yeah,
it's a reaction. You know,
yeah.
it's something that you learned before. It's the pathway, that your chosen pathway, your learned pathway. And it's almost like that farmer's field that's got the established track. So everyone takes the track because it's the easy road, right? It's the easy route. But you might not like where that track takes you.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's really fantastic. It's a really great analogy, because that track that gets formed in childhood. And effectively what we're talking about there is neuroplasticity. And where that track is formed is in your emotional memory bank, which is your hippocampus. So these farmers tracks get caught. Now you can see there's a far better route, but you've got to cut across a muddy field.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep cutting across that muddy field until you've trodden that into a path, before that becomes a chosen path, before that becomes the instantaneous desire of the brain. But until that point, you are going to do the path that your parents just carved out for you.
Yeah.
So that's a fantastic analogy, mate. Yeah, that's so good. I'm learning more in here than you are.
Don't be like that.
It's brilliant, mate. That's a fantastic analogy. You're absolutely right.
I've used it with people before, because like I think analogies are really helpful. They're a helpful way of getting people to understand sometimes complex ideas or concepts, you know. But just as we come to an end, this has been amazing. I've literally been like, I just like can't believe how much information you've provided in such a short.
If I could, I'm so sorry. Can I just finish off the emotional intelligence? We've got.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No. Just because otherwise someone will go, he only did 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So what did I say? Self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, social awareness. You should always aim to leave the room in a better state than you found it. That should be everyone's aim. Understand who is the most vulnerable person in this room and what am I doing to support that person. Like that should everyone's like that should just be everybody's mantra. Like, I'm going to leave this room better than I found it. Understanding the effect you have on other people. There's this like horrible, toxic nonsense thing about it's always about number one and no one else's opinion matters and da. Or just be like a decent human. Like just try and leave room for better states.
Or what's that? That's like, don't be a dick.
Yeah. Don't be a dick. And finally, motivation. There's lots of people in this world who understand those first four parts of emotional intelligence in great detail, but they choose not to, because ultimately ego prevents them from altering their behavior. Like, discard your ego. Don't be afraid of changing who you are. Have the motivation to challenge your emotions, to make sure you're being empathetic to other people and try and leave rooms in better states than you found them. Have that motivation to change the world. And those are the kind of the five steps, the 5 parts of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, that's perfect. That really is. And it's right. There's a lot of just that last bit, even, it's just about just being okay with not always being right or being the smartest person in the room, and all of that ego pursuit. I get it. I understand. I've been that way sometimes, and I'm sure I'll be that way again in some day, but I think I'm always trying to get to what's helpful, not be right. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what's helpful, what works, how can I get this person to understand? I remember once when I used to be a PT a long time ago, and I was working with this lady and she really wanted to deadlift. She'd seen it and she wanted to deadlift, and I'd tried every trick I had in the book to teach this lady to deadlift, and every now and again she'd get it right, but predominantly she wasn't quite there yet. And then one day I had the video recording and she did this deadlift and it was perfect. And I said, this is it. Have a look at it. So I played it back and she saw herself do this deadlift and she went, oh, what you're talking about is a slut drop. And I went, a what?
No.
It's a slut drop. And apparently there's a film, well, not apparently, I've seen it now, called Legally Blonde, where a lady does a slut drop and it looks like a deadlift. And I thought, I would have never picked that as an explanation for the deadlift. But if that's the language you speak, if that's the way it translates to you and you understand it, let's go with that.
And there's so many like great turns of phrases, and sometimes someone comes up with something and you go, oh, that's brilliant. I really like that. This wasn't quite, I learn as much from my clients as they learn from me.
Oh, absolutely.
There's everyone's got a story. There's a quote that I saw and I posted on my story. I think I did it today. I think it's been a long day. I nearly said last week. I realized it's just how long today has been. And it's basically that. I think that the last line of it is you have never met a completely sane person. And I was like, that's interesting, because when you consider that about 70% of the UK population has what we would identify as a traumatic experience, has identified a traumatic experience, and about 20% of those people then develop post-traumatic stress disorder in some form of it, and then we can kind of identify that 10% of the UK population is therefore living with a traumatic stress, which is about 6,655,000 people. Whoa. But if you consider, that's people who would reach a diagnosis, but there's sub-threshold related symptoms. So people who don't necessarily meet the criterion for a PTSD diagnosis, but who are living with sub-threshold. So people with like seriously maladaptive behaviors who, might become aggressive and distant towards relationships, but that's not enough to get a diagnosis. Or people who might not sleep at all, that's not enough to get a diagnosis. These people, like millions and millions upon millions of people, far more people will be living with sub-threshold than potentially than with an actual diagnosis of PTSD. So then you've got these people running around. You've probably never met a fully sane person in your life.
Yeah, you're, man, honestly, you're incredible. You really are. You're right, though. You're right, because it's like that pressurizing word, normal.
Yeah.
I eradicated that from my vocabulary. I use the word typical now sometimes because I think that's more pliable. It's it has more. You almost assume that there's differences, whereas normal. I've not met this person. I don't think they exist. What's normal mean? What's that about?
Yeah. There's a lovely quote, like the only normal people are the ones you don't know particularly well.
It is true. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Mate, you're remarkable. You really are, and I'm so grateful for this. And I'm just going to hold it up for those that are watching on YouTube. Think yourself resilient. by James Elliott. Go and get it. It's a great book. It really is, and there's lots of information in there. You'll read it once, and then you'll come back to it for the rest of your life, I think, until he writes another one.
Oh God!
Yeah, he's like, I ain't ready for that. Yeah, I can't talk about that. Yeah,
It's not even if I'm ready for it. It's my, the poor people who have to work with me. I've had an idea. No, you haven't. They're so great. They're so great. They're so, like, honestly, I think that's like, I always make a point about success is down to the people who are around me, and I couldn't have asked for a better team of people to help me. Like, I genuinely couldn't. Like, I feel so like really genuinely blessed. So I was speaking to one of the editors yesterday, because I'm back in. I'm recording the Audible next week, and I said, "Oh, will there be an opportunity for us to see each other?" And it's just like, because you sit and you go through these like incredibly personal experiences and write this stuff down, and like we have these discussions, and it goes up and down and left and right, and you just can't wind up forming this bond. And so I just feel so blessed for the people who have like supported me, and not just the people, my amazing team at Thread who've helped me write the book, but like all of my friends who have cajoled, bullied, harassed,
supported.
Yeah. You get like there are times when I've had to remind myself that like you definitely need to have a thick skin to be a squaddy sometimes. With that level of abuse that you get, you definitely do. But that's their way of showing love, and it's just been amazing. So I know that I'm really lucky to have those people in my life.
Yeah, I agree. And thank God for them. Otherwise, that wouldn't be around with it, the book. So thank you so much, mate. I mean, just last question. Is there anything that you'd like to pass on that could help people with their self-development?
Okay, so if I was to ask you the story of Icarus, people say, oh, there's a boy who flew too close to the sun and his wings melted and he fell to the ground and he died. At least he flew, mate.
Yeah, love that. Love that, mate. Mic drop. What's next for you, mate? And where can people find you?
So social medias, Instagram, James Elliott Official, LinkedIn, James Elliott. I have a Facebook, but like that's like my safe space. My safe space. That's where I can kind of like engage with like close friends and family, because you don't really get the opportunity to do that when you develop a little bit of a following. It becomes very much business orientated. So if you would like to engage with me business wise, please LinkedIn and Instagram, and there's links to the book on there. There's links to my website. If you'd like to talk to me, please feel free to do so. I do my utmost best to stay on top of the DMs as best as I can, so please do message me on either of those platforms. What's next is obviously loads of podcasts at the moment, like fully overwhelmed with podcasts, which is great. Fully smashed doing recording the Audible, finishing my dissertation for my master's at the moment, which has been really, really enjoyable, really, really challenging. Just the world of science is just so unbelievably brilliant and so much more complicated. Every time you think I'm getting a handle on something, I'm learning something new that's turned it upside down. And so, so lots of that. And then lots of like really exciting client work. I've got some really high performing clients who are doing some really, truly amazing, wonderful things. And it's just such a joy to be a part of that with them. So yeah, lots of that.
Well, they're in good hands, man. They really are. So, mate, listen, I've treasured this. This has been really, really great. But it's a nice way for me to spend my Friday. I get to go and tell my son all about this, and as we drive to Twickenham tomorrow, so this will be a good conversation.
Yeah. Oh, man, honestly, Twickenham is so great. I remember I took Georgie Porge there, so my daughter, Georgina. I took her there, and it's just a memory that I'll always cherish. Taking her there. It's just a great ground, mate. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, well, we're taking Grandad with us.
So
it's just going to be a very, very special time, and I'm going to really going to treasure it. So
yeah. I love that, mate. Have a great time. It is fantastic.
Brother, thank you so much for today, and I look forward to doing this again someday.
Yeah, cheers, bro. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.